Wow, I gotta say, I have been pleasantly surprised with this season of Rick and Morty, with a third strong episode in a row for Season 8, and what is definitely my favorite of the year so far. Episode 3, The Rick, the Mort, and the Ugly, is an episode that gives us a full-on follow-up to the Citadel of Ricks, which felt impossible after the previous events at the Citadel, and in classic Rick and Morty fashion, they take a small spin-off story to a place that feels like it could fill out an entire spin-off series if they wanted it to. So let's go back to the Citadel one last time and explore episode 803 of Rick and Morty.
Oh, you been there?
So, as a little crash course, since the show has only released like 70 episodes over the past 12 years, the Citadel of Ricks is a concept that goes all the way back to Season 1, Episode 10, Close Encounters of the Rick Kind, which also happened to be the very first appearance of Evil Morty. And despite being a pretty huge concept as far as world building goes, it only made 4 appearances before its destruction in the Season 5 finale, Rick Morty Jack. The remnants of the Citadel were also seen in the Season 6 premiere, Solarix, and briefly in 606, Jurixic Mort. But it felt like the Season 5 finale and Season 6 premiere spelled out a pretty definitive end to the Citadel, particularly because the Season 6 premiere, Solarix, also used a plot device to send every single person back to their dimension of origin, which Morty calls out here in this episode.
I thought everyone got sucked back to their reality of origin. That happened, right?
Exactly.
So again, it really felt like the show saying, okay, we are done with the Citadel stuff and the countless other Ricks and Mortys thing, which I was definitely mixed about at the time, because while I understand the show wanting to move its world forward and not rely on the same ideas, Season 3's Tales from the Citadel, or the Ricklantic Mix-Up, still remains one of my all-time favorite episodes of Rick and Morty. Another episode that felt like it could fill out an entire spin-off series if it wanted to, giving us some really fascinating and substantial world building into the society that formed on the Citadel via a series of interconnected vignettes. To me, it's an episode that represents Rick and Morty at its absolute best, taking established lore and really expanding it out in ways that are both unexpected and creative. And this latest episode, The Rick, the Mort, and the Ugly, is for sure a spiritual successor to Tales from the Citadel, even sporting a familiar framing sequence. The episode starts with our Rick and Morty salvaging space junk from the destroyed Citadel before needing to make an emergency landing on a nearby asteroid, which contains a ton of refugee Mortys. As they explain, since everyone was returned to their dimension of origin, these Mortys are actually the clones that were created at the height of the Citadel's power.
The Citadel was basically a factory farm for spare bodies. That portal reset sucked them all back.
This does even feel like it was teased through the first couple of Citadel episodes. Back in Season 1, there were Ricks selling Morty insurance. The Rick that the evil Morty was controlling in that episode used a massive wall of tortured Mortys to conceal his location, and at the very end of the episode, Rick was given a coupon for 1 free replacement Morty. Even in the Season 5 finale, Rick went to a storefront for a Build-A-Morty. But this is effectively a direct story follow-up to the information that Evil Morty revealed in the Season 5 finale as well, unveiling the lengths that the Ricks would go to source more Mortys, manipulating Jerry's and Beth's in various dimensions to get them together, and yes, straight up cloning Mortys to fill out their needs. Mortys basically became a commodity, but as it turns out, they were also cloning Ricks. So this one reconciles with that idea by revealing that all cloned Ricks and Mortys were sucked back to the dimension in which the Citadel exists, as that is their place of origin. And predictably, they immediately fell back into a Ricks vs. Mortys class system, with the Mortys sort of setting up this makeshift little settlement, salvaging parts from the Citadel and trying to get by. But this episode basically frames itself in a very similar way as the all-time classic Tales from the Citadel, introducing the episode with our Rick and Morty, who are presented with something that ties to the Citadel, before Rick rejects the adventure and makes a sort of metatextual comment asking, why would we do that?
Anyone continuing to explore the Citadel is either stupid or one of the unfortunate millions held hostage by their terrible ideas.
Then, of course, it immediately cuts to an episode that specifically explores the thing that Rick just called stupid. This one opens the exact same way, after our Rick and Morty are confronted by this farmer Rick on the Citadel-adjacent asteroid.
What's that guy's deal?
Morty, I can't imagine anything worse than having to know.
And just like Tales from the Citadel, we get a nice little musical montage introduction, really great vibes all around here. There's some amazing visual storytelling showing this Rick's farming setup. He seems to be harvesting this crystal corn and turning it into some kind of liquid to sell or barter with, which he does over at the Clone Morty settlement. Where this episode differs from Tales from the Citadel is that it really does just follow this Rick through a single story thread, whereas its Season 3 counterpart has maybe 3 to 5 story stories that intertwine and connect thematically. And personally, I found this story to be pretty damn interesting. The Morty settlement gets raided by a bunch of clone Ricks who shoot our farmer Rick and kidnap most of the local Morty clones. The episode does a great job really quickly showcasing the new status quo for what's left of the Citadel. And I think it also does a really interesting job highlighting the ongoing power struggles and cycles of abuse here. These cloned Ricks were previously lower class citizens, all of them basically created for some kind of specific purpose within the Citadel hierarchy, society, economy, etc., including the new leader of the Citadel.
I was cloned to be the mascot of a Citadel gumbo chain.
Honestly, this entire development has a very Escape from New York vibe to me, which is funny because that's also what Roiland's other series, Solar Opposite, does with the Wall storyline, but that's neither here nor there. Or I guess it's both here and there. The important thing about the remnants of the Citadel Society is that the moment these clone Ricks get the opportunity, they not only seize power, but begin to use that power to enslave Mortys and put them through the ringer. And not only that, they are shown to be trying to use these Mortys to figure out how to clone more Mortys that they can use and enslave underneath them so that they can rebuild a comparable system, despite the fact that they themselves were victims and byproducts of that very system.
Once I have the requisite Mortys, we can all be kings here, Mr. Trafficker.
This also gives us insight into how exactly this sort of remaining colony is functioning. Obviously, the Morty clones are serving the Ricks, but there also once again seems to be a higher class of Rick that enjoys these fancier lounge areas, complete with entertainment, refreshments, service, etc. And then other Ricks, like this Trafficker Rick character, kidnap and bring Mortys to the leader, Gumbo Rick, in exchange for the second hottest commodity for a Rick, portal fluid. He gets a tiny vial for the Mortys he's retrieved, which he then distributes out to the other Ricks on his team a few drops at a time. They're basically all working for their ticket out of there, many claiming their plan is to leave the moment they have enough for a single jump. I also love that this new Citadel is actually just the centerpiece / center section of the Citadel as it was seen in space previously, which is now missing its 3 subsections. We actually even see one of these subsections destroyed on the asteroid surface at the beginning of the episode. We previously saw that the entire Citadel was still floating in space despite the fact that it was destroyed, at least the last time we saw it in season 6. So this must mean that the remaining Rick clones managed to salvage this massive centerpiece and place it down on this planet's surface. I also love that while the Citadel itself is being used, there's even further visual hierarchy, as there are many other settlements outside of and surrounding the Citadel. Honestly, this gives me massive Final Fantasy VII vibes, very Midgar-like, high upper-class city above everything else, lower-class citizens underneath. But after we get our real in-depth look at the remaining Citadel, our farmer Rick is saved and resurrected by some of his own droids, only to find his pigs have been killed, his house has been burned, and his gear has been ransacked. Oh, and his Tori Amos CD has been vandalized. Those clone Ricks are ruthless. As you might expect, this sends him into revenge mode. Now, to me, the real meat of this story, outside of its thematic messaging about power struggles and cycles of abuse, is this Rick's journey and the minor mystery surrounding him that unravels. Why did this Rick resign to such a quiet life living among the Mortys? While he definitely still doesn't show any real affection for Mortys, maybe even some disdain, he does seem to be participating in their society in a way that helps them continue to operate. Sorry to jump ahead, but the episode eventually reveals that this Rick actually isn't a clone. He was the Rick that led the cloning program on the Citadel previously. The fact that all of these cloned Ricks and Mortys even exist is largely due to him. So I wonder if this Rick was mildly motivated by his guilt over the situation he had put these Mortys in. Sure, not enough to outright help them, but enough to give them his business rather than associating with the remaining Rick clones, who certainly could have given him a lot more bang for his buck and a nicer, more cushy place in their society. We even learned some great clone Morty lore through these 2 Morty stowaways who are trying to save their friends.
My Rick wasn't so bad. He used to take me and Summer to the park. No, he didn't. I have the same memory. It's fabricated.
This is actually a pretty crazy insight into the Citadel's level of control. These clones were given false memories to try and sway their feelings and maintain their allegiance to the Ricks who governed them. I also love that this differentiates these 2 Mortys pretty thoroughly here, showing that Arcade Morty is much more sure of himself and confident. And I think this might be attributed to his place in their little Morty society, which, while small, seemed to really center around the the arcade. This Morty really was a major focal point of their settlement. I love Arcade Morty's gung-ho attitude in trying to rescue his friends, but I also have to wonder if his initial motivation was also because he had found such a strong position in their little society and he didn't want to lose that. It does feel like this entire episode circles around these hierarchical structures and ultimately rejects them. As you might expect, upon learning the truth, Arcade Morty is pretty devastated by Farmer Rick's true role at the Citadel, but despite this, despite once again being presented with an opportunity to rise in that societal structure, this Rick uses his abilities to fight the oppressive Ricks and save the oppressed Mortys. The episode shows that if these structures exist within their society, there will likely always be Ricks and Mortys vying for power, down to their last moments of existence. Even Trafficker Rick attempts to ransack the remaining portal fluid and dies in the process. Cajun Rick confronts Farmer Rick one last time in a last-ditch attempt to maintain his position, of course, to no avail. And I think that's why I love Farmer Rick's full journey here so much. He was this vital cog in the hierarchical machine of the Citadel. But his initial plan post-Citadel destruction was basically to remove himself from the equation, likely due to that guilt he felt for perpetuating that hierarchy. But in the end, he fought to eliminate any remnants of that structure that he formerly upheld, seemingly feeling obligated to end the suffering. And he does this in two massively important ways. He fully destroys what remains of the Citadel of Ricks. Like, I do not think we will ever see this thing return now. This has got to be the last chapter. But even more importantly, he shows the remaining clone Mortys mercy.
Go make some memories that aren't fabricated.
I really love this line, but I think even more importantly, this show of mercy and message to make new memories seemingly motivates Arcade Morty to end their own hierarchical structures.
No Morty towns or citadels or huddling together. It's time to grow up.
I think coming from Arcade Morty, this is a pretty amazing ending message. He was seemingly the one who stood to lose the most from abandoning their asteroid colony. He saw this Farmer Rick sacrifice, his decision to do what's right instead of what placed him in the most privileged position he could manage, and it helped Arcade Morty realize he had to do the same thing. It's sweet. I really like this ending. And he seems to take the brunt of the trauma from this whole endeavor as well. He returns to Rick's homestead and gives him and Doc Morty their own memorial tombstones. Maybe he'll go to find a new place to live after this, but at this moment, it seems like, much like Farmer Rick, he has given up his livelihood for a greater good. I do hope he finds a place to make his own non-fabricated memories, though. And of course, the episode ends with our Rick and Morty basically making a mockery of the entire thing before bailing again. It's about what you'd expect from them. Overall, I just genuinely loved this episode. From its world building to its one-off characters to its action, it's for sure my favorite of season 8 so far. I'd say my only real complaint is that, much like the Tales from the Citadel, I fell in love with the possibilities of the stories being told within this societal structure, and I would have loved to see more of it. Even Cajun Rick as a villain was so much fun, and I'm sad he was just a one-off, but that does often tend to be my complaint with Rick and Morty. They sort of refuse to linger on any one idea for too long, which I respect as a means to keep the show fresh, but as an obsessive lore whore, I kinda hate it. But despite this was a great episode, and again, I think this is pretty easily the strongest series of episodes to start a season in years for the series. But what do you guys think of the Rick, the Mort, and the Ugly, and the seeming end of the Citadel of Ricks? Did you like it as much as I did? Let me know below in the comments, and stay tuned. I'm sure I'll cover more episodes as the season continues. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny two cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny two cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.